Every morning, Toby and Henrietta collect workmen from the junction and take them to the quarry, and bring them back home in the evening. When they're at the junction, they often meet James. "You're late!" James snapped one morning. "Only by a minute," smiled Toby. "I'm sure no one minds." James snorted crossly. "Just mind you're on time later!" By now the workmen had boarded Henrietta, and Toby was soon making his way along the line. But as they went, Henrietta began to feel strange. "Is everything all right?" asked Toby. "I'm not sure," replied Henrietta. "I'll ask my guard to look me over when we reach the quarry." They soon arrived, and as Toby arranged his trucks to bring down, the guard checked Henrietta over. But he could see nothing wrong.
"I don't see anything," he said, puzzled.
"Don't worry, I'm sure it's nothing really," said Henrietta. Toby was worried, but he trusted his coach's word. So once the whistle blew, he set back off down the line. For the rest of the day, all seemed to run well. Henrietta forgot all about her trouble, and Toby felt more at ease. Soon they returned to the quarry to take the workers home. But as they were about to leave, trouble arose.
"Henrietta's brakes are jammed on," called the guard. "That must have been the trouble from earlier."
Henrietta felt terrible. "Don't worry," Toby smiled. "It's nothing which can't be fixed soon."
"All the same," said the driver, "we better call for a bus for the workmen."
Henrietta still felt guilty. "Just think, it could have been worse to happen on our old line," laughed Toby, trying to cheer up. "We don't have to worry about Bertie replacing us." Toby suddenly stopped. He'd had an idea. He explained it quickly to his driver. James snorted. Just wait until the Fat Controller hears about... James stopped suddenly. What? There, rolling into the station was Toby, with trucks full of workmen in tow. They all climbed happily out and thanked Toby for a fun ride. James puffed away without saying another word. That night, the Fat Controller came to see Toby in the shed. Toby was worried. I am sorry, sir. I know it's not proper, but I didn't want to delay James further. We did it on my old line, as this was just the one time. But the Fat Controller was smiling.
Don't worry, Toby. I'm not cross. I'm very pleased with your quick thinking. A fine piece of work. But all the same, we'll have Henrietta back in service tomorrow.
Oh, thank you, sir, smiled Toby happily. Soon, Toby and Henrietta were reunited, and they continued to happily pull passengers up and down their line. But from that day onward, they never had to rely on the truck's help again.
It was evening. Edward had had a busy day, and as he stopped at the last station before the junction, he was looking forward to getting home. "Get in quickly, please," he whistled to the passengers. The passengers got in quickly, and Edward's driver pulled the lever. But Edward found that he couldn't move. The driver checked Edward's brakes, but nothing seemed to be wrong. He scratched his head. Whatever can be the matter? He wondered. He gave Edward more steam. This time Edward started. But went only a little way before he stopped with a groan. "It's no good," the driver said to the fireman. "Something is holding us back. Go and see if the guard can help, please." The fireman jumped down to the platform and ran along to the guard's van. "What's up?" demanded the guard. "Reckon the brakes have seized on," said the fireman. "Is yours off all right?" "Should be," replied the guard, and he tried to turn the handle, but it wouldn't move. The fireman helped, but they still couldn't turn it. so they called the driver, but it made no difference. The brake handle had stuck fast. "We shall miss Henry's connection at the junction if we can't start soon," said the driver. "Let's give Edward everything he's got and hope for the best." "It'll be hard work," he told Edward, "but I'm sure you'll do your best." Rather doubtfully, Edward agreed. "Come on! Come on! Come on!" he puffed fiercely. Smoke and steam poured from his funnel, and slowly the train moved after him. Once they were moving, things became easier, but Edward found that he couldn't go fast however hard he tried. Oh dear, he said. "I'm sure we'll miss Henry's train." Then, suddenly, there was a jerk, and everything was easy. Junction quickly, and while the passengers changed to Henry's train, Edward's fireman went to find out what had been wrong with the guard's brake. "One tiny nut," he told them when he came back. "It broke and jammed itself against the brake so that we couldn't turn the handle. Then after we started, the brake itself broke so that we could move properly." The driver laughed. "Come on, Edward," he said. "Let's get that guard's van into a siding where it can be mended." Who would have thought that one small nut could cause so much trouble?
Dilly the duck lives at one of the stations on Duck and Oliver's branch line. She is sometimes referred to as Donald Duck, and since her Topham hat has an engine called Duck, you can imagine that people are sometimes confused. She came to the line after Donald had been teasing Duck, the engine. Duck got his own back when his driver and fireman put Dilly inside Donald's water tank. When she popped out, Donald's driver and fireman treated her kindly, and she soon became a favorite with everyone on the railway. But one day, Dilly disappeared. "Have you seen Dilly?" the station master asked Donald's driver and fireman. "No," they said, "not since last week." The station master and porter searched everywhere. They looked under seats, in waiting rooms, behind cupboards, and on high shelves, but they couldn't find her. They even looked in the room below the signal box where the oil lamps were kept. But it was no use. Dilly had vanished. Days went by, and came weeks. Weeks became 1 month, and then another, but still no sign of Dilly. One day, Duck was waiting to start from the station. Nearby, sleepers had been laid between the rails to make a path for the railwaymen. "Right away, mate," called Duck's fireman. But as he turned back towards the cab, a movement on the railwayman's path caught his eye. "Wait, wait! Hold it!" he shouted suddenly. Duck stopped before he reached the place. It was lucky he did, for, waddling across the line not 2 feet from his wheels came a small procession. 1, 2, 3, 4 pale brown ducklings wobbled over the sleepers, followed by their father, who, now and then, prodded his beak at any duckling who happened to dawdle. And at the head of the family strutted, have you guessed? Yes, it was Dilly. She proudly led them up the slope of the platform to where the porters were hurriedly arranging for a welcome home party for her. Dilly is delighted with her family and enjoys being admired by the railwaymen and passengers. All the same, she still finds the time to ride in Donald's tender now and then, just to show that she is still Donald's duck.
Percy was spending the night at the shed at the big station. He was due to take trucks back to Thomas's branch line the next morning, and the bigger engines were glad to see him. "Well, well, little Percy," said Gordon grandly. "It's nice to have you with us for a change. I trust you, Thomas, and Toby are running that branch line of yours efficiently." "I think so, Gordon. Percy replied, though he wasn't quite sure what efficiently meant. That's right, rumbled the big engine. No late trains or angry passengers. An efficient railway is a great responsibility, as I, of course, know only too well. What the Fat Controller would do without me to keep things running smoothly, I can't imagine. Henry and James do their best, but someone has to keep a responsible eye on things. It must be splendid to race along with a train of heavy coaches, sighed Percy enviously. When you were ill that time, it took Thomas, Duck and me to move them, and then the three of us couldn't go very fast. Never mind, said Gordon. You kept things running. That's what matters. It's a knack, I suppose. My big wheels help, but there's more to it than that, of course. Next morning, Gordon had steam up before Percy. Percy needed water, but because he hadn't enough steam to move, Gordon offered to push him to the water column. Thank you, Gordon, said Percy gratefully. That would be very kind. Not at all, Gordon said proudly. It all helps with the smooth running of the railway. Responsibilities, my dear Percy. Responsibilities. Percy had a long drink. Soon his steam pressure had risen nicely, and he was ready to go and find his trucks. Gordon, meanwhile, hadn't returned to the shed. He dozed in the sun until it was his turn to take water. Percy moved away. Gordon tried to follow him, but he found he couldn't. Come on, Gordon, said his driver. We haven't got all day. Your train is due out in an hour. I can't move, Gordon groaned furiously. I've got cramp. I can't move my pistons. Percy's driver came to see what was the matter. Jammed valves, I reckon, groaned Gordon's driver. The fireman went to find an inspector, and Percy buffered up gently to Gordon's front. Puffing hard, he managed to push Gordon back into the shed. And then went quietly to fetch his trucks. He didn't say anything. Somehow it didn't seem tactful. Later, when Percy met Thomas at the junction, he told him what had happened. Poor old Gordon, chuckled Thomas. But that's what it is to have responsibilities. and the two engines puffed off to run the branch line as efficiently as they knew how.
One night in the shed, Thomas, Percy, and Toby were talking about buses. "It was partly the buses that closed my old railway," said Toby sadly. "It took away Henrietta's passengers, you see. We never once had an accident, but it made no difference. Everyone went by bus and nobody traveled in Henrietta." "A bus called Bulgy tried that once with Duck and Oliver," Thomas remembered, "but it didn't work. He's a hen house now." "Serves him right," put in Percy. "He got too big for his bonnet." "I remember when Henrietta once scored over a bus," said Toby reminiscently. "Tell us," urged Percy. "It was one summer," Toby began. "The road beside our line was busy. As well as cars going to the seaside, it was market day in the town, and the buses were full of people, either going shopping or coming home. But there was no one in poor Henrietta. Driver wanted to leave her behind for the last journey of the day, but I didn't. 'There's nowhere in her now, but you never know,' I told him. Well, we started, and we hadn't gone very far when a bus full of people whizzed by much too fast. "He'll come to a bad end, I shouldn't wonder," my driver remarked. He was right, too. Before we'd gone another mile, we came to a bend. Workmen had been mending gas pipes and had dug a deep hole in the road, just around the corner. They had put warning signs up, but that bus must have been going so fast that he couldn't stop in time. By the time we got there, the signs were broken and the front wheels of the bus were hanging mid-air above the hole. He couldn't move, and even if he could, his front end was so bent that his driver couldn't have steered him properly. "Serves him right," said Percy. "Well, we stopped nearby," Toby continued. "The passengers from the bus stopped telling the driver how careless he had been and came over to see us. 'Can you help?' they asked. 'We want to go home, and that bus is no use. Can we travel in Henrietta, please?' 'Of course you can,' replied the driver. 'Climb in. Toby and I will have you home in no time.' So Henrietta and I took the passengers home, finished Toby. It took a little longer than no time, I'm afraid. I can't go very fast, but wasn't it lucky we took Henrietta? You never know, do you?
Thomas had gone to the works to be mended. So the Fat Controller asked Duck to look after the branch line. Duck was delighted. It was a nice change, and he got along swimmingly with the coaches. Percy was happy to see him again. And although Toby was grateful for the help, he found Duck to be rather opinionated. One morning, Toby was bringing trucks from the quarry. Bertie was approaching the road crossing. But to Toby's horror, he wasn't slowing down. The brakes came on, and both engine and bus shut their eyes. They just missed each other. When they met at the station, Bertie was most apologetic. "I'm sorry, Toby," he sighed. "I've got a new driver, you see. He seems to think I can beat you to the crossing." "That's all right," Toby smiled. "I just hope he doesn't put you in danger like that again." Duck arrived with Annie and Clarabelle. He'd heard everything. "Didn't your driver see the crossing gates, Bertie?" "There are no gates," Toby replied. "It's..." Duck gasped. "How can you run on a line with no gates? It isn't dignified. Otherwise, those road vehicles wouldn't know to stop." "I know when to stop, thank you," scowled Bertie. "It's for your safety as well as ours, Bertie," replied Duck. "Accidents cause problems for all of us. The Fat Controller needs to put up gates at once. You should have asked him to do so ages ago." Toby and Bertie said no more. "I don't believe it, Percy," said Duck. "I never thought Toby would be foolish enough to run on an unsafe line." "The line is safer because Toby runs on it," replied Percy. "His cow catchers and side plates work wonders. You needn't worry, Duck. If the Fat Controller thought gates were needed, he'd have put them up long ago." Duck was unconvinced. They were needed, in his opinion. Recently, one of the level crossings had been having issues with its gates. Sometimes they worked as intended. Others, they stuck, no matter how hard the signalman pulled the lever. There hadn't been any accidents, only headaches from the delays, and the engines took great care when they approached. Unfortunately, no one had warned Duck. The next morning, Duck was puffing happily along. The coaches sang quietly to each other, and Duck was pleased with himself. He passed a level crossing, its gates keeping traffic at bay. Now that's the way, he thought, just like a proper railway. At the troublesome crossing, the cars and trucks had passed safely through. A new signalman was on duty. He pulled the lever and went back to his coffee. He didn't notice the gates had stuck. Duck soon approached the gates, but he didn't worry. They'll open, he smiled. But they didn't. They're sure to open. They have to. Still, the gates stayed shut, and Duck was getting closer and closer. Stop! Stop! He cried. His brakes screeched and his whistle blew, but it was too late. Duck sat on the crossing, remnants of the gate clinging to his front. Oh dear, he blushed. There wasn't time to examine him. Traffic was building on either side of the crossing. Percy had to pull him to the next station. When they arrived, Toby and Bertie were there. Toby? Asked Bertie, innocently. Who's that? It's Duck, replied Toby. Though it seems he can't decide between pulling a train and being a crossing guard. Whatever he's doing, it doesn't look very safe to me. They laughed as Bertie roared away with his passengers. Duck blushed once again and looked at his buffers, decorated by the broken gate. He wouldn't be making any remarks about safety for quite some time.
On the Northwestern Railway, the Fat Controller feels that there is always room for expansion. This leads to more goods trains, and the engines and workmen are busier and busier as the months go on. all of the extra work. Not enough time for people to see my shiny red coat. James, still sulking about the heavy goods trains, didn't pay attention to the signalman's mistake. He forgot all about James and directed him onto the branch line where Toby had failed. Hold on a minute. Driver, I think we're on the branch line. I think you're right, James. Soon, turning around the sharp bend, he saw Toby on the line. Get out of my way! But there was nothing Toby could do. James braked hard and both engines shut their eyes. Soon, Percy and Mavis arrived with the breakdown train, and the Fat Controller inspected both engines. Oh, bother. Don't worry, you two. This accident wasn't either of your faults, but now you both are damaged. Mavis, you'll have to take Toby's jobs while he's away. And James, I'll have to see who can take your place while you're away. But the other engines were busy with the work they were already given. So he had to make a phone call to the other railway. The only engine available was an old visitor they all knew too well. Right, I've a lot of goods that needs to be delivered all over the island. I need a hard-working engine that'll pull anything. No tricks to the other engines, no lies or pushing trucks into the sea. I better not see that from you here ever again, Diesel. I'm trusting you that any kind of that behaviour will never happen again.
No, sir. It'll never happen again, sir.
Good. And the Fat Controller reluctantly walked away. But Diesel didn't keep his word. He was rough with the flatbeds and bumped and banged the trucks about. They watched him as he was doing his work.
Any rougher and those logs will fall right off of us.
They said to themselves,
Don't let him get the better of us.
Careful with them. They'll pay you out if you don't give them the proper treatment.
Go along with your passengers, little Western, and mind your own business.
Pay no attention to him, Oliver. He'll smash himself to bits one of these days. Soon a train of coal trucks had to be taken to Croven's gate. made great time. Diesel was going faster than he should have. His driver wanted to slow down, but Diesel insisted on going faster. They soon came to a red signal. The driver looked out the cab and slowly applied the brakes.
No, 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 no! Keep going! On!
The cold truck surged into Diesel and his driver fell out of the cab.
Stop! Stop! Stop!
Wailed Diesel, but they paid no attention and forced him down the line. The track up ahead was washed out, and the rails led down into a lake.
Oh, grease and oil! I'll never hear the end of this!
Diesel's driver phoned the workmen, and Edward came to clear the mess. Diesel couldn't move on his own, so Duck pulled him back to the station. The Fat Controller was cross. All of it told me how rough you were with the trucks, and I do not appreciate such reckless behaviour. You'll be sent back to the other railway, and maybe you'll learn a thing or two about taking care of trucks when you're back there. And hopefully you'll be a really useful engine. Once Diesel was sent away, Oliver took over in his place. He shunted the trucks with care and got on well with the other engines. All trucks must be handled with care, because when they sense trouble, they'll pay you out.
Percy was talking to James in the shed at the big station.
My guard was telling me how lonely he gets in his van. I think he ought to take some passengers sometimes. It might cheer him up.
He's not allowed to do that, said James virtuously. It's against the regulations. Guards are important, and passengers might distract them, so that they couldn't look after the train properly.
Oh dear,
said Percy.
Yes, I suppose they might.
They do it on the Midland, put in Gordon. Someone told me about it when I went to Carlisle with that special, but they don't do it on the other railway. It's on some preserved line where they haven't got any coaches.
You see, James?
Said Percy triumphantly. Oh, well, if they haven't any coaches, that's different, James huffed. I'm sure the Fat Controller wouldn't approve, though.
Pooh!
Replied Percy cheekily.
Little you know.
He puffed away to collect some trucks from the harbour. Meanwhile, on the branch line, some passengers got out of Henrietta at the station by the airfield. They all went through the ticket barrier, except for two, a man and a woman.
Ah, said the ticket inspector when he looked at their tickets, you've come too far. You should have got out at the last station.
The passengers looked at him. Then they looked at each other and shook their heads.
The last station,
the ticket inspector repeated, slowly.
You must go back there.
There was a pause. Then the man said something to his wife in a language the ticket inspector didn't understand. He asked the porter to bring the station master. A short time later, Percy came chuntering happily along the branch line with his train of trucks from the harbour. He saw the signal at the station by the airfield was set at danger, and the station master waiting for him on the platform.
Oh dear, there must have been an accident,
he thought as he stopped.
I hope no one's hurt.
The station master came over with the two passengers. I'm giving the guard these two passengers to travel in his van, he told Percy. They're foreigners who came too far on Toby's train by mistake. Will you stop at the station by the river and let them off, please? Percy was confused.
Passengers?
He asked when the guard had taken them away.
But this is a goods train.
That's right, Percy, said the station master. They're going to travel with the guard in his van.
But James says it's against it's not allowed, sir.
The station master laughed. James is right, Percy. But I don't think James or the Fat Controller would mind us helping two foreign visitors on our island who can't understand our language, do you? That made it all right, of course. The guard saw that his visitors were as comfortable as he could make them in his van, and when, a few minutes later, they reached the station they wanted, they came to the front of the train to see Percy. They nodded and smiled and shook hands with the driver and fireman. Then the guard showed them to a taxi, which was waiting to take them on the rest of their journey. A few weeks later, a parcel arrived with brightly colored foreign stamps on the wrapping. Inside were warm new scarves and gloves for Percy's driver, fireman, and guard, and a letter addressed to the Fat Controller, saying how splendid his railway was. Percy was proud. But he didn't tell James.
It might make him jealous,
He said to himself.
and that would never do.
The quarry on Thomas's branch line was busier than ever. There were plenty of orders for stone, which meant more trips down the line for Mavis. She was delighted. It was refreshing to leave the quarry. There were so many trucks that Percy couldn't take them all himself. The other engines sometimes took mixed trains to help him. Toby was used to this. Thomas complained bitterly. Why should my passengers have a bumpy ride because Percy can't manage another couple of trucks? It's more than a couple, I'll have you know, huffed Percy. Besides, those trucks are better behaved than ever, thanks to Mavis. She could at least shunt them properly for us, grumbled Thomas. Her job is to manage the quarry, not your trains, chuckled Toby. You just want to laze around in the shed. Thomas spluttered, but Percy and Toby just laughed. The next morning, Mavis rumbled in with the trucks. Morning, Thomas, she smiled. Fresh stone for you. How wonderful, yawned Thomas. It's lovely coming down the tramway early in the morning, mused Mavis. I wonder when I'll get to see more of the line. Suddenly, Thomas had a cheeky idea. I was in your wheels once. I was stuck at the big station, but I wanted to see more. The Fat Controller saw how well I shunted the trains for the other engines, and he rewarded me with this branch line. He paused for effect. I think, continued Thomas, if you were to shunt trains, the Fat Controller would be quite pleased. A little initiative can take you a long way. Down the line, that is. I have some time before I'm due back at the quarry, Mavis smiled. Perhaps I could shunt your train before I go. How's that for helping out? What a splendid idea, Mavis, remarked Thomas. Most kind of you. For several days afterwards, Mavis would shunt Thomas's trains after she brought the trucks down. At first, she was eager to help, but balancing shunting with quarry work soon wore her down. This didn't bother Thomas. All he cared about were a few more minutes of shut-eye. One morning, Mavis fussed into Farquhar and found Percy waiting. "Hello, Mavis. You do look tired." "Never mind me," she huffed. "Where's Thomas?" "Helping at the big station for the morning. I'll be taking Annie and Clarabelle instead." "Well, I'll have your train shunted as quickly as I can." "Why would you shunt my train?" quizzed Percy. Mavis explained her conversation with Thomas. "Oh, that Thomas!" scowled Percy. "I knew he didn't like shunting, but I didn't think he'd stoop this low." "You mean shunting wasn't how Thomas got his branch line?" "Huh! If that were all it took, I'd have my own branch line too. You let him shunt his own trains from now on, if he's so good at it." Mavis was fuming. She wanted to pay Thomas out. And that's when an idea struck her. "Yes, Percy," she smirked. "That's exactly what I'll do." The next morning, the sun rose over the sheds. Thomas was fast asleep, having a lovely dream, when suddenly, "Thomas! Thomas! Wake up!" Thomas's eyes jolted open. His driver was frantically trying to get him started. "Oh, what's wrong?" he yawned. "You overslept," scolded the driver. "And now you're late." Thomas gasped. He looked at the station clock. Sure enough, it was almost time for him to leave. The passengers stood impatiently on the platform, with no coaches to board. "Oh, where's that Mavis?" he grumbled. There was no time to ponder that. Thomas hurriedly fetched the coaches and readied his train. He worked as fast as he could, but he was very late as he set off up the line. He was later still when he arrived at the big station. The passengers erupted from Annie and Clarabelle. They had some choice words for the station master. Naturally, when the fat controller found out what happened, he had some choice words of his own for Thomas. The next morning, Mavis was surprised to find Thomas wide awake when she arrived at Farquhar. "This is a surprise," she teased. "Decided to shunt your own train for once?" "I'm sorry I tricked you," sighed Thomas. "I certainly made a fool out of myself, didn't I?" He paused and looked at his buffers. "You've worked very hard the last few days. Much harder than I have. How would you like it if I worked at the quarry in your place for a while?" Mavis was surprised. "Oh, Thomas, do you mean it?" "Of course," smiled Thomas. "There's no better way to see more of the line, after all." The fat controller made the arrangements with the quarry manager. Mavis was soon hard at work on the branch line, while Percy took Annie and Clarabelle. She handled the goods work. She reveled in her journeys to the junction and proved to be really useful. And Thomas? He worked at the quarry for quite some time. It was hard, dirty work, and the trucks put him through his paces. He was thankful when Mavis did come back. And when he returned to his shed, he felt his shut-eye was well earned.